also known as ZAP. And she is our capital connector at the EC. And she is the person to go to when you're looking to raise capital, get connections, and first off, to make sure you're capital ready. Zap, pass it over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. And I'm going to try and do not the mic. If I do that, can y'all hear me? Is that okay? Awesome. Cool. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining me here today. I think this is a lot more people I expected for a workshop about just something that's kind of boring, but thanks for being here. So as Lauren said, my name is Zap. I have a role that we sort of made up here at the EC called Capital Connector, and my job is to educate entrepreneurs and kind of guide them through the capital raising process. What we're going to talk about today is whether you should raise, what you need to raise. I'm going to spend the bulk of the time talking about raising equity from VCs and angels, because I think that's typically what the majority of people come to me to talk about, and it's the most confusing and mysterious, let's say. And then we'll also talk about raising different types of capital through bank loans, crowdfunding, venture debt, things like that. I want to add a couple of disclaimers. So just for some context, everything that I learned that I'm teaching here today, I've been all completely self-taught. It was really going out and asking, oh, what? Oh, you do need the mic? Okay, I'll do mic then. How's this? Okay, this is better. And I learned it through going out and asking questions that sometimes I feared were dumb questions. And that's the only way that I learned all of these pieces. I did work in venture capital, which gives me some credibility, but truthfully, none of my role working in venture capital is what taught me this. It was, again, asking the questions. And then I didn't even get an MBA. I don't think you need an MBA to learn any of this. It's really going and talking to people who have already done it. So I implore you to, at any point in this conversation today, feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. If I think it's good to address at the moment, I'm going to. So, first, should your business raise capital? These are kind of all reasons that I would mark as these are good reasons to raise. So you validated that there is certainly a problem in the market that needs to be solved. You've probably done some customer research. You probably maybe have some traction to prove that it's there. The next is you can demonstrate people want this product. I think a great way to raise capital is say, people already want to buy this from me and I haven't even built it yet. I have these letter of intent signs, anything like that. You need to take over market share. Maybe you're already in market and you own, maybe you have captured just a small percent of the market share and you believe that you provide a better offering than your competitors. You're unable to meet demand, like your team is just too small to meet all the demand coming in and that you need for your business. Same kind of thing, you lack additional staff. And then this one you'll need as well as you plan to one day sell, get acquired, or IPO. Let me know, because a lot of people come to me being like, I have a super awesome idea. I should raise money. And I think the tough reality is that people think big ideas are worth something, and ideas are completely useless. It's entirely about the execution. Most institutional investors are not going to even kind of look at ideas much, and they certainly will. I have not met a single institutional investor who will sign like an NDA because your idea is worth so much that it's a secret. Most of them, they care only about the execution. So thinking about like the timing of like, when do you raise capital, what do you need? So I would wait if you need to generate more interest from your end user. So there's a lot of people meet with me being like, okay, I'm ready to raise capital, like I need this, and it's pretty common that I say, listen, you need to go and prove this out a little bit more. You need to prove that you have more interest, that you can actually grow this. Then is the right time to raise capital. You're going to be seen as way too risky of an investment, and it doesn't make a ton of sense to just go out there and get a ton of no's. Another great reason to wait, if you have the resources to bootstrap, which means essentially self-fund your business without raising outside capital, I will advise 10 times out of 10 that if you have the money to bootstrap, you should certainly bootstrap. Like you should fund it yourself before you bring outside capital. And then certainly, if you don't have the time to go raise. Raising capital is a full-time job. It often takes 4 to 6 months. It takes literally hundreds of meetings. I'm going to get more into that later, but you have to understand that different parts of your business, like, it's really hard to execute greatly on everything when you're focused on raising capital. As opposed to kind of good signals of like, this is time to go, is if you have traction that's just like moving super quickly, like if, like I was describing earlier, if you have more customers coming in and the demand, or if you have more demand than you can really fulfill from the team that you have or the product that you're offering, that's a really good point. When you are going to run out of cash, certainly if your business is going to almost run out of money, yet you're still making money and you think you can make more and prove it, or sometimes it's like you just need like a strategic investor. So there's someone who you think can really come in and take your business to the next level. Oftentimes this is maybe raising from corporations, raising from someone who understands your space super well. They've already built and sold a business in your same space. You're like, I need an expert to invest in me and also provide strategic support. So some pros of raising capital, I mean, certainly having more money in the bank can potentially accelerate your business growth if you've raised at the right time and you kind of know how to do it. It can bring you, again, as I mentioned just last slide, is it can help you. Most investors, when they write a check to you, they certainly want to make sure their check, they get it back plus some, so they're going to oftentimes be hands-on with the business and provide you with expertise and help. And then it can always build your network. Some cons, I think a lot of people forget about the cons, and I spend a lot of my time in that office really explaining. I promise you this is not all upside, there's a ton of downside, and I can introduce you to a ton of founders who either regret raising money or they oftentimes regret looking back. They might regret who they raised capital from, which is, I mean, certainly you lose equity in your business, and we're going to talk through those numbers and kind of the cost of raising equity, but you lose control. Like, as soon as you have someone else writing a check into you, all of a sudden you're not making all of the decisions of your business. And as a business owner, it's your baby. You built this, you believe in it, and then someone who doesn't know everything that you put your blood, sweat, and tears into is telling you decisions that you need to make, potentially, depending on how you've structured your board, can make decisions for you. It's a huge risk to take. You're really getting, when someone invests in you, you're getting married to them, and I would advise getting to know them quite well. And it's time consuming, like I said. You can go out and raise, and it'll take you months and months away when you maybe should be focusing on getting new customers, hiring a team, improving your product, but instead you're spending months meeting with investors and getting a ton of no's, and it can feel oftentimes like a waste of time, but there's just a lot more expectations. So, what do you actually need to raise money? And this is a great thing to kind of come talk to the EC about, which we can certainly help with, is you need 1 to 3 very concise business description. This sounds super simple, but a lot of people, they mess up this first part is because they can't really find a way to explain their business in just a brief amount of words, and it's all about kind of nailing that to generate interest for people to invest. You don't need a one-pager necessarily. I did put this on here because it might be a good sort of piece to have to share with people. You certainly need a deck. And in this workshop specifically, we're not covering decks, but if decks is something you're more interested in, this is something at the EC here we advise on a ton. We can show you great examples. We can connect you with advisors who are like, this is how your deck should look. I will tell you everything wrong with your deck if you would like me to. I'm really good at that. You need to build out a financial model. Even though a lot of businesses who raise money, I kind of joke all the time, I'm like, well, this is made up math. You've made a little bit of money, all these numbers are sort of fake. In a way, it's all what if statements in terms of kind of these early companies' financial models. You still need to paint a very clear and concise picture of, hey, investor, this is how we're going to make money. This is another thing we can certainly advise on, a product demo. So how your product actually works, how people use it. It's definitely easy if it's something people can pull up on their own computers, download on their phone, and just walk through it themselves, but if not, a video demonstrating it. And then this I see super commonly, and it's the worst when I see it, is your business must be incorporated as a C corporation. and not an LLC. You can maybe raise from your personal network through an LLC, but I'm going to talk again about what I call institutional investors, so venture capitalists. They are exclusively going to invest in C corporations because it benefits them tax-wise. And so I highly recommend, if you are planning on raising capital one day, you can always convert from LLC to C corporation, but it's just way easier to get that done sooner as opposed to later. And this is another thing there's like a great tool online called Gust that has their CEO is local to Nashville that can set it all up for you super quickly and easily, and you don't need a lawyer or anything to do it. Okay, I'll harp on this one. Oh, go for it.
Could you repeat the last one you said about the...
Oh, yes. So if you want to set up a C corporation, Gust is a platform that makes it super easy to do, let's just say. I think it costs probably that. So I think setting up an LLC is $300. I think a C corporation, I'm going to guess, is $1,000. But what's great is it kind of sets up all your legal documents, and if you raise money or give equity in the future, you can manage it all on that Gust platform. And if it's something simple, you don't ever need like a lawyer to get involved. Yeah, of course, great question. Yes?
That's a significant tax difference. So if you're going down that road, it changes everything.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to harp on this a ton because I might meet with you a lot of you after this, and I just get so many people who are like, I have a $1 billion idea, and I'm like, that's awesome. Let me help you get your idea into market so we can prove that it's worth $1 billion, because right now, as an idea, it's just really not. And so when we were talking to institutional investors, so I'm going to keep using that word, sorry, I should explain it. These are people who, they are professional investors. This is what they do for a living. There's just a way that this industry works that I'm describing today. I can say, if you want to raise VC money, you got to play the VC game. And so what we're trying to teach is, how do you play that VC game? And it's certainly not approaching someone with an idea on a napkin. It's approaching someone with kind of all the materials I described, but then also sort of what we're going to get into, what you need. So there's different types of equity investors. There's angels, so that's individual investors. There's venture capital funds. VC funds, the simplest way I can explain, so they're people that go out, a VC fund is managed by a general partner, a GP, and they go, I know exactly the right companies to invest in. And they raise money from high net worth individuals, so people who have good financial means, essentially like, okay, I trust that person to invest my money. And then this person raises millions of dollars, and then they decide what they want to invest in at what terms. And so this is someone who, some of these firms can be small, there can be one-person venture capitalists, but it's like their full-time job is writing checks into early-stage companies, and they're looking always to provide a return. So the difference is like an angel, it's their own money. Like, they're looking to get their own money back, and so they work a little bit differently, while a VC, like, they raise maybe $100 million from some people that they need to give $100 million back to, and then some. So they're constantly like, how can I explain? There's an expectation for them to meet, and so they hold you to a very specific expectation as well, I would say. Family offices, this is when an individual who's so high net worth, they don't write checks themselves, nor do they invest in a fund. They just created a team that invests their money for them. And then different accelerators and incubators. At the EC, we run many accelerators, but none of them invest, and none of them take equity, which is sometimes an upside for some founders, sometimes a downside. It sort of just depends on how you look at it. But there's several programs across the country that will write a check into you for a piece of equity. In exchange, you have to go through, let's say, like a program or a course. Okay, what's next? I love it. My intern made these slides. What do you need to raise money from VCs? You have all those coins right there. If you meet this criteria, there is a lot of funny stock photos on this I had to delete, but I had to keep this one. Anyways, be able to raise money from an institutional investor. So that would be the venture capital fund, that would be the family offices, that would be incubators and accelerators. I would say most of the time angels, but ultimately angels are individuals. They can do whatever the heck they want. But if you want to go in front of a professional investor, this is sort of like the questions you can ask yourself. First of all, can your business get big enough? Most investors are looking for businesses that can at least reach $100 million. That's the number that they're looking for. So this is a huge issue when, this is something that comes up when people approach me with their business, is we kind of take a look of what's your business, well, I shouldn't get too far ahead of myself, but, so let me back up here. But anyways, my rule of thumb is I take a look at a business and I figure out, okay, you sell this product for this much, and how many people can you possibly sell to? How many customers exist out there on whole? And if you take 1% of that, 1% must be greater than $100 million to be a venture-backable business. If that number is lower than $100 million, a venture fund is probably going to pass immediately, let's say. So that is sort of the threshold to be able to generate interest, to be able to raise venture dollars. So I kind of actually have an example of a company that came to the EC, and it was a solid technology company. It had customers, it was doing well. I was like, this is interesting. But then when I dug in deeper, I kind of did some research on what their market is, and kind of understood, even though they were making a good amount of money a year, it looked like a solid business, their average contract was $25,000 a year. But there was only potentially 2,100 companies who could purchase their technology. So even if they sell to every single company in their market, their total addressable market is only $52 million. And so they just weren't really, they were trying to raise money from VCs, and it was like, well, this is never going to work because your total addressable market is just simply too low. But we kind of took a look, and they might not do this, this is a real life example I'm pulling from that they may or may not listen to my advice. But it was like, okay, what if we kind of switch something about their business model? So we could have switched who they sold to. In this case, we switched it, instead of selling to companies and businesses, they could sell directly to the end consumer. And so they figured out that they would instead take that same technology, sell to a different audience, and all of a sudden there's 9.5 million people who could purchase their technology for an estimated contract of $150 a year, which created a much larger, oh, this is smaller. Oops. Don't look at this. This is a messed up number, but which created a much larger total addressable market. Number two, do you scale through a business model that VCs know and invest in? So now we're going to have some, startup lingo here that hopefully you've heard before, but all of a sudden it becomes way simpler. So first of all, I should say VCs typically only invest in businesses that scale through technology. Sometimes they do invest in physical products and goods. They can invest in brick and mortar businesses, that is oftentimes the exception, let's say. And so the first sort of model is B2B. So you are a business and you sell to other businesses. A great example of this is Salesforce. Salesforce is a technology business. They sell to other businesses. Why they like businesses selling to businesses is businesses oftentimes pay a lot more than individuals because they have a lot more money. I would approximate that 75% of institutional investors exclusively invest in businesses selling to businesses. That's all they want to do. That's oftentimes the quote-unquote easier business model, but it depends. A B2C is a business that sells to end consumers. My example here is Twitter. So they make money, Twitter's not selling anything necessarily to other businesses. They make money through their users using it. I would say probably 20% of VC funds do this mix of B2B and a little bit of B2C, but B2C is usually a very strong minority of their portfolio of what they invest in. And approximately 5% of VCs do B2B or do B2C. Then there's kind of these funky ones you don't see quite as much, like marketplaces. A lot of investors also don't like marketplaces because they're like considered super difficult because you need both sides of the market. It's like in B2B and B2C, it's like, okay, we just need to get this many more businesses, or we just need to get this many more people. Marketplace, you're like, think about Amazon. They had to get all those businesses to sell on their platform, and then they had to get all these individuals to become Amazon users. And so it's considered one of the more challenging business models. B2B2C, my example here is kind of funny, OnlyFans, which means that if you guys are familiar with OnlyFans, they would need, it's free for a business to use OnlyFans, but when that business makes money off of their customers, that's when the original business takes a cut. Those aren't as common. And then B2G is business to government. I would say that only very specific funds invest in business to government businesses just because it's a unique buyer. The sales cycle is very long. As we know, government doesn't necessarily move the fastest or purchase things quickly, but that is another business model. Okay, so the challenge of business models, and this is what I was saying, is like the majority of investors exclusively do B2B, then a good chunk do still majority B2B, just a little bit B2C, and then really a very small minority do B2C. And here's why. So here's like 2 examples of businesses I'm hoping the audience is familiar with. WhatsApp is a B2C app. It requires, I made this number up, but this was my guess. It probably requires about 25 million users to make $1 million in ad revenue. I have no idea how much money it would take to go acquire 25 million users, but it would probably be a huge team, a huge marketing budget, a huge ad spend budget to go get 25 million people. B2C businesses are usually very capital intensive up front. They oftentimes are the biggest wins that we all know of, like Facebook and Uber, but a lot of investors, they're just high risk because most things don't become Facebook and Ubers, let's say. As opposed to, let's say, Slack. Slack, and this is actually a real example, they can charge a 1,000-person company $850 per month per user, meaning that an annual contract with them is $100,000. So they only need 10 customers to reach $10 million in revenue, which requires much less upfront capital. You could potentially hire one salesperson, and that one salesperson could go to market and sell to 10 businesses in that year and make $1 million. And you could maybe pay that business person $100,000. So when you think about kind of these 2 differences, that's why investors, it's just usually less risky oftentimes to invest in the business to business. So usually, a lot of times when someone comes to me with a B2C product, I might push them to be like, let's figure out how to make this B2B, huh? Like, what businesses can we sell this to? Sometimes I push them to B2C, but that's not as common. Okay, number 3. This one's kind of the interesting one, is are you really the right person to build the company that solves this problem? So as the founder, you kind of like, they're always judging you, because a lot of these bets, because your company is so early, is are you the right, like, we're betting on you to figure it out. Like, we're barely betting on the business model. What, you're doing a little bit in revenue? Like, we're betting on you to find the solution to this. So number 1 is, oftentimes investors really like people who have a very unique industry insight. So let's say maybe they worked in construction in a very niche space, and so they were able to identify, I know exactly the problem this construction industry has, and I have the network to go sell back to this construction industry. So they're looking for, what's like this advantage that this founder has, that like, they're the right person to build this company. They know more than anyone else, they know more people in it, that's a huge factor. Number 2 is like, have you ever done anything like this? How do I explain this? Investors oftentimes like, although there's sometimes, there's like the 22-year-old kid straight out of college who raises money, they oftentimes like someone who has either, 1, been an entrepreneur before, even better if they sold that business, but even if they failed, it's better than never being an entrepreneur prior, or 2, worked at a very entrepreneurial business that did raise money and either did sell or fail. They're very cautious against people who have never taken the leap into entrepreneurship because they worry that they don't know what they're about to face. And then number 3, this one's like a little of a tricky one too, is like, Are you just someone that they meet you and they're like, hell yeah, like this person can build a $100 million company? And ultimately, I think when I meet with founders, this comes way more internally than not. Sometimes I think people, they want to raise money, but they don't fully believe that they can. You have to be delusional enough, ultimately. And I mean this in like an awesome way. Like I work with people who are delusional enough to be like, oh yeah, I'm building a $100 million company. Like you have to buy into that idea to then get other people to buy into that idea behind you. And then I just added this too, is like, how much personal risk are you taking? You know, did you quit your job for this? How much capital have you put into this? Here's an example, like, I had a doctor come talk to me about wanting to raise money for something he's building. And I said, well, when are you going to quit your job? And he's like, well, I'm not going to quit my job because I make like $500,000 a year. And I'm like, yeah, but you just told me your business is worth $1 billion. If you think your business is worth $1 billion, I think you'd quit your job tomorrow. Like, and that's kind of how investors think. And it was like, well, you're trying to raise money and you're telling me you make $500,000 a year. How much of your own personal money have you put into this? I mean, ultimately, institutions want you to be, what's the right word for it? Let me think here. They want you to be like, kind of, like they want you to put everything into it. Like they want to see that like, if you fail, like you have nothing left almost, which a lot of people like don't want, but like that's the amount of personal risk that they sort of expect their investments to be taking, which is a tough pill to swallow sometimes, but unfortunately the reality. Number 4, do you have the capability to build a tech product? I should have just put product here as well. Like I said, the majority of institutional investors only invest in technology companies. I would say 98, 99%. And so if you're building a technology company, like how the heck are you building technology? Like, do you know how to build technology? If so, that's a big thumbs up. If you don't know how to build technology, did you recruit a CTO to help you build the technology? Or did you recruit a lead engineer to help you as well? You can outsource all of your tech development, but most VCs, they just don't like that. They go, you know, if you're building a tech company and you've outsourced the tech, like, what are you actually building when you rely on some agency, let's say, to build the technology for you? I would say same with like if you're building a consumer brand, like certainly someone has to like manufacture your product, I'm sure, but it's like how involved are you in the manufacturing? Do you know how to kind of run that supply chain? Pieces like that. Number 5, do you have a vision to exit the company in under 10 years? So again, institutional investors, their job is to make money back for their investors, because they also raise money from other people. And those investors want their money back sooner as opposed to later. And honestly, 10 years is probably as long as they'll let you go until they're like, we gotta sell this business. We need our money back now, type of thing. And so if you were trying to run the business like for your whole life and don't have a good chance of IPOing, which I don't really cover that much because we don't really have businesses in Nashville that IPO quite yet, hopefully one day. It's like, how are you going to, like, when are you going to sell this business? And it's even better if you have a vision of like, who would want to buy your business? Like, the sooner you have like a line of sight into being like, here's the potential buyers for my business, I think we can get to this big and sell it for this much. Even though you kind of make it all up because it's all like these what ifs, like the better story you can tell that's realistic is going to help you out. But you need to understand that it's not like you can run this business for the rest of your life if you raise equity. They're going to, and oftentimes when you raise capital, here's another thing, when I talk about losing control, it is not uncommon that your investors force you to sell when you might not want to sell. That's probably like that's a huge hiccup that comes up. Number 6, do you have any traction? Again, ideas are worth nothing, and so people really want to see, can you execute? Can you prove that there's demand for this? There's like different VCs have different criteria. I can tell you this much, in the city of Nashville, there is not a venture capital fund that I know of at least, and I think I know them all, that writes checks below you making $500,000 a year. And so a lot of my job is trying to find investors who will invest in you below that, but none of them are like, yep, Zap, send us the deal that's making no money. They still want to see, like, a lot of funds, even if the earliest check writers, they oftentimes are like, okay, we want to talk to the person who has 2 customers. This is what they'll do as part of their deciding whether or not they're going to invest. They're going to interview those 2 customers so they can learn more about you as an investment opportunity. So you could potentially always raise money having no customers, but it's really hard, and you probably have to have some other boxes checked that I covered today. Otherwise, you certainly need the traction. Also, I point out the traction is like, some companies come to me and it's like, hey, we're making money. And it's like, yeah, but you only make a little bit more money each year. Like, how are we going to make a ton more money to get to $100 million? Like, what's the plan here? And so they're just not looking for incremental growth. I didn't really put like the hockey stick on here that most presentations have, but it's like investors are looking for a way of like, how are you going to 10x my money? How are you going to 100x my money? And that's why they oftentimes don't invest in services. So if your business requires you hiring more people to deliver what you're selling, that's oftentimes just completely not investable by institutional investors. If your business can scale through technology, then all of a sudden that changes sort of how you grow, how much money you can make, how quickly, and it becomes more venture backable. So I actually I didn't create this, that's a lie. I stole it from a VC fund that has invested in some deals in Nashville. And this is their sort of scoring system that in their first meeting with the founder, they're looking for answers to all of this. And this is what they sort of use to decide whether or not to invest. And so it's kind of the pieces I just covered, but if you come meet with the EC, we are going to probably put you on the scoring system, but it's figuring out like maybe how you can move. So again, the team is like who is actually building this company? Do they know about this space? Do they know about starting businesses? Are they technical? The market, is it big enough? Are they building something huge and massive? The product, I would sometimes like eliminate this because a lot of times you really don't need a patent or like IP protection. It sort of depends. I can talk to you more about this specifically. So this one is kind of like depends on your business. Your stage, like I said, this is sort of the piece of traction. And then your horizon. When are you going to sell this business? They love it when you sell sooner as opposed to later, as long as you made the money. Okay, and then you have to figure out how much do you raise. This is where you get into like this weird, fickle venture math stuff. It kind of depends on the stage, which I'm going to talk us through the stages next. But if you raise too much money, so let's think about like Shark Tank. Someone comes to you and they're like, I love your business. I want to put $1 million for 40%. Well, then you might do well and keep growing your business, but when you want to go raise more money again, well, you've already sold 40% of your business. So other investors might not want to come in because then they're like, well, this founder's going to be diluted down to like nothing, and they're like not really going to care as much, or there's just not enough of a piece for us to take here. So you run a risk of making it difficult to raise another round with your company being worth more. If you raise too little, then you risk having too little money to sort of get you to the next point. I guess I should put this slide later. I'm going to go through the stages next, sort of explain the typical stages in VC. But it's simple but not so simple. You have to figure out how much you need to raise to get to the next fundraising round and what metrics you'll need to hit to get to that next fundraising round and how much money it's going to take you to hit those metrics. Once you raise once, you oftentimes raise again. You kind of get on what they call the VC treadmill. You just got to keep going. That's kind of the industry standard. But typically people raise like every 24-ish months, but it kind of depends on how they're growing. So when you raise, you give up equity or % ownership in your business. Founders receive common stock, VCs receive preferred stock. All you really need to know today, because this is 101, is it means who gets paid first? These guys. They get their money back before you do. Only if you make a bunch of money do you get money back, type of thing. Otherwise, if you just make a little money back, you're paying back those investors first. That's why it's not always a good deal. So when you do raise, you raise with like a financial instrument. The most common, I would say, and the one that I would recommend, which is why I put a star, is called a SAFE, which it stands for what it is. It's a simple agreement for future equity. So you might say, this is for like very early stage founders, which this is kind of who we work with here. Okay, this investor puts $100,000 in, but your business doesn't really have like what's the value of your business? It's kind of like this murky thing because you're maybe only doing like $10,000 a month in revenue right now, but they believe you're going to become big time, but you don't really have the numbers to say like my business is going to be worth this much or that much. So instead, a safe note just is like, hey, I'm going to give you money, and when you raise again, and if you raise in the future, then you'll price it. And that's when you get more into like those Shark Tank terms, where they're like, I'll give you this much money for this percent of your business. So then let's say you raise, and it's usually like a pretty common one is it's a 20% discount, a $5 million cap. So what that means is when you raise in the future, let's say you go raise from Shark Tank, and sorry, let me back up. So let's give it an example of what I said, the 20% discount, $5 million cap. These are the only terms that need to be negotiated when you do a SAFE. A SAFE is super easy. You don't need a lawyer. There's standard documents online. If you just Google it, it makes it really easy to raise money, so that's why most people use it. Then you go, let's say you get on Shark Tank and you raise $1 million for $10 million. So all of a sudden your business is valued at $10 million. Well, that original investor, their 20% discount means that even though your business is now worth $10 million, their discount is 20%. So they get in their $100K for an $8 million valuation of your business. Or it'd actually be the better one. It kind of goes to whichever the investor prefers. The cap, if you raise a $10 million valuation and you have a $5 million cap, well, that investor gets in their $100K for $5 million. So it does whichever is better for the investor, but essentially provides it safety of like, the investor doesn't know what your business is worth, one day you'll raise more, or you could just sell at a number, and it sort of protects them of whatever is better, either through the discount or the cap. A convertible note, this was a lot more common back in the day before safes are almost like a new invention, I would say, and they were invented because they're a lot easier for other people to use. It's more of a debt investment up front, which means that the investor pays, this is what I'm not that good at explaining because I do like 90% safe notes to be honest, but it essentially means that it is the same as the safe as it converts to equity later, but potentially you don't have to convert them to equity, you can just pay back, like it works as a loan, you pay back the principal and interest. But if you do that, that's like very naughty and they just don't like it. And then the price round. This is more expensive, it requires lawyers, it typically comes at later stages. That's going to be more like the Shark Tank money of like, I'm giving you this much money for this percent of your business. All of a sudden your business has a very specific value. Your business is worth X amount. Another thing we can advise on here at the EC is like, how much is your business actually worth? How do we figure it out? It's a bit nebulous in the early stages, but we have advisors that can actually help you shape and figure out what that right number is, what that right discount and cap is, given the stage of your business, and just dive a lot deeper into this topic. Okay, so pre-seed, this, I'm gonna go through rounds. So this is kind of typical. If you raise from institutional investors, this is the rounds that we raise at. So pre-seed means it's the earliest. It means that you've identified that there's customers, you have something, there's people that you can go sell to. You've probably started building a product, or you already have a prototype. Pre-seed investors are really betting on the founder. They're betting that this is like an opportunity here, but there's oftentimes like very little real numbers and traction in customers to prove it. Pre-seed companies are usually valued at $1 million to $5 million, and they typically raise from angels, angel groups, their friends and family, people that they know, and there is some pre-seed funds. Here in Nashville, we don't have any pre-seed funds. So that is just so we have one, which I'll talk about. But Seed round is oftentimes the first time you raise from a VC. You typically have a product in market and you have some revenue to prove it. The median fundraising amount, this is actually from Carta, was they raised $3.1 million. Usually your company is valued at either 5 to 10 million, and investors at this round are usually VCs and angels. Series A means that like you've really proven it. Now you kind of created a machine of like you put more money in, you get more money out, type of thing, or at least they hope so. Usually you raise about $6.4 million. This time it's going to be more of a priced round, so it's not going to be as safe, nor is it going to be a convertible note. Usually you are raising so much that you really only raise money from venture funds at this point, and this gets a lot trickier because there's way more lawyers involved. Like I said, valuation, it's kind of what your company is worth. It's direct, I'm not just read off it, but it's the amount of money you raise and the amount of equity you've given up to investors. So if you raise $1 million for 10% of your company is worth $10 million. Most founders sell about 20% of ownership in their company at the seed stage, and then another 15.5% during the Series A. Valuations are pretty fluid. Like if you go out and raise and say like, I think my company is worth this, it's pretty often that investor is gonna try and negotiate. It's kind of like Facebook Marketplace. They're like, oh, I think your company is worth this. And they're going to sort of drive a hardball and get you to lower your valuation so they own a larger chunk of your company at the end of the day. So, like I was saying, we don't have any pre-seed funds here in Nashville. What we do have is Invest Tennessee. So Launch Tennessee is a statewide organization that supports making Tennessee the best place in the country to start a business. They started a fund that is essentially the government provides this money to invest in businesses that maybe VCs in the community, in the state, are not already investing in. As part of this fund, so they're a VC themselves, but it just works a little bit differently from a traditional fund, given that it's more so run by the government. There's two funds within it. One is the Regional Seed Fund. So they are writing pre-seed and seed checks from $25K to $250K. And then the Tech Fund is going to be writing more seed to Series A checks, maybe Series B, I don't know, $250K to $3 million. And there's some requirements of like how much business do you have here in Tennessee, like do you employ people here, is your headquarters here? You apply at investtennessee.org, and we can also help you with that application process. And then there's a requirement that if they commit, let's say $100,000, you don't get that money until you go raise an additional $100,000 from outside of Invest Tennessee. So there's unique matching requirements. So angels, these are the individual investors. Oftentimes they look for the same-ish criteria to funds that I've just been describing, but they can certainly be more flexible because they do whatever they want. There's less expectations, let's say. Most of these come from your own personal network. A lot of them are former entrepreneurs themselves who have built and sold their businesses. But if you are to raise from someone, they have to be an accredited investor legally. That means that they've either made $200,000 in income the past 2 years, or they have $1 million in assets. So essentially it means you have to raise from someone who has the means to understand that they are taking a huge risk by betting on their business. And you can't like publicly share when you're raising money. Like you can't go on LinkedIn and be like, hey y'all, I'm raising money, you should invest, we're gonna make so much money. That's illegal. You have to only kind of network it privately and kind of only approach investors if in goodwill you think that they are accredited with the opportunity to invest. And you can't guarantee that they're going to make money. So this is sort of standard because a lot of people are like, nobody wants to invest. Shucks. Because they have like 5 to 10 meetings and it hurts. It hurts because you get no's a ton. I would say a lot of the founders I work with who raise money have, this is like honestly a minimum number, 100 meetings with investors to get to a yes. So that means you get 99% no's, 1% yes, and it sucks, honestly. Nobody really likes raising money, let's say. And it typically can take anywhere from 3 months, I would say, to, given that the market is sort of tough right now, people are not as loose with their money, with interest rates being so high, it can potentially take up to a year to raise that money because you have to take so many meetings, and investors are very slow. They might be interested, but they need to get to know you for much longer to feel like the business is safer. They need to see your business move up. It's super time consuming. Okay, finally we're going to get into what's not VC. Sorry to cover that so much. An alternative funding option. So if VC isn't a fit for you for any of the criteria I said, or if you kind of heard my warning signs of like why VC isn't always the right thing, there's some other options. One is crowdfunding. This is still raising equity. There's providers like WeFunder, Republic, Start Engine. These are essentially like platforms that you raise through that make it super easy to do this, and you need to pay lawyers way less, and it's like public, and everyone can do it through a link. WeFunder actually has an office in Nashville, so I always recommend them since they are local. So like I said, angels, when they invest, they have to be accredited. They have to meet that either income or net worth requirements. With crowdfunding, they actually changed this law. Like WeFunder essentially went to the government and said, this sucks that we only let rich people invest in companies. Like, we should let anyone invest in companies. And so if you do a crowdfunding round, anyone can invest in your company for $100 minimum. And so this is a great fit for anyone who has an audience, who has loyal customers. You can also raise from venture and then still raise crowdfunding on top. A great example of crowdfunding in Nashville is there's a new wine bar called Bad Idea. Bad Idea is in East. They raised a good chunk from angel investors. So again, these high net worth individuals. But then they went out and they also did crowdfunding on top because they wanted to allow any person in the neighborhood to invest in this wine bar that they were building there. And so it's another way, and you're also allowed to publicly market for anyone to invest. Otherwise, you cannot publicly market, but all of a sudden now you can post on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm raising money and you should invest. But you still can't guarantee that you make the money. So crowdfunding is still challenging though. I think sometimes people think this is like the fix-all solution. You have to get a lot of people's attention. It takes 100 meetings to raise maybe from VCs and angels, but it's going to take probably 1,000 people looking at your post, if not more, to raise from crowdfunding. Thinking about, so I'm shifting to debt, but thinking about debt versus equity. Most people, and I would advise, prefer debt because it doesn't dilute your ownership. If you think about it, all the investors I just talked about, they care a lot more about upside. They make money when you make money, and that's why they need to make sure that you're making a shit ton of money. While debt investors care a lot more about probably the safety of the investment. Are you able to pay it back? What's kind of the plan here? But oftentimes I feel like people just think equity is like better or like cheaper, and that's not the reality at all. Oftentimes equity is the more expensive option, definitely the most expensive option if your business succeeds. So I just kind of put this example of like if you raise $1 million for 10% of your business, one day if you do well and you are worth $100 million, your investors get $10 million of that. That's a lot of money. As opposed to if you're able to take out $1 million loan at, let's say I made this number up, 10% interest, if you pay it back a little bit each year, in total, you only paid $1.6 million. So you only gave up $600,000. Even if you wait 10 years to pay it back, still, you only had to pay back it really only cost you $1.6 million. So if you can get debt is almost always cheaper than equity. There's also this thing called venture debt. It's pretty much like a bank loan, but it's way more high interest, and it typically follows when you raise equity as well. So sometimes people are raising $3 million, 2 of it is equity investors, 1 million is debt. It's unlike a bank loan, where a bank loan is probably going to want to see like what assets you have, other pieces like that. The venture debt, really they're factoring in how they care less about cash flow, and they care way more about your ability to raise more capital in future rounds. And they do take warrants, so if your startup does succeed, they get paid through equity as well, so they're super smart like that. Also, this is also venture debt, but it's revenue-based financing, which is also just a loan from essentially not a bank, but a venture debt fund in exchange for a percentage of future revenue. They really work with companies that have annual contracts who just need more money to like go secure more annual contracts, but it's people who have like a very safe amount of money coming in to sort of infuse more capital. Then there's SBA loans. This is like a special type of bank loan that is put on by the Small Business Administration, which allows banks to do risky loans. I sort of compared, if anyone's bought a house in here, it's like an FHA mortgage. So if you're a first-time home buyer, they make it easier for you to buy a home. They give you kind of better terms. There's like some pros and cons to it. This is sort of like if you're a small business, it's like the FHA for small businesses. You have to have under $10 million. They'll fund startups, but you must have ways to repay the loan. I kind of give examples of all things they can fund, things they can't. Kind of a fun fact though that I thought was super cool is you only need 10% down to buy a small business with an SBA loan right now. So if you want to buy a business, which is super popular, that was a significantly lower number than I expected. SBA loans allows you to put less down in exchange and have a longer loan, but in exchange there's like a fee. So again, comparing it to the FHA, you have like a fee when you're a first-time home buyer. It's like insurance. You have to have higher rates, and I will say you do have to take a big risk. You have to take a lien. If you own a house, you have to take a lien out on your house. So their rates are prime plus 2%. So right now it's 10%, and they can give you $5 million. We actually happen to have a visitor from SBA. You want to stand up?
Sure.
You want to just come up here? You want to say something?
Yeah, sure. So all of that is correct. So my job specifically for SBA is I am with the disaster office. So because there is a current tornado, then I am in town, deployed in town, just to make sure that everyone understands what SBA loans are available during the tornado. So there's just a couple things that I want to mention, and I'll hang around afterwards if you have any questions. But you can apply for a disaster loan even if you have COVID idle through SBA, and I know a lot of people are affected by that. You don't have to have any damages necessary. So what she's talking about is that working capital with SBA. You can actually do that while it's a presidentially declared disaster in the area. The interest rates are extremely low. You still have that up to 30 years to repay that. You get up to $2 million. And interest rates are extremely lower than the regular SBA loan. So I can talk to you about that afterwards. Startups can apply for a disaster loan. So if the tornado happened December 9th, if you were in business legally, like you had your business partner set up, your LLC, whatever, December 8th, you can still apply for a disaster loan. You just have to show projections, your business model, and certain things like that. I'll talk to you later if you have any questions. And we're also having a resource fair February 2nd from 12 to 6 p.m. at the Avon Williams campus downtown. There's going to be the IRS there, USDA, SBA, SBA Disaster, a couple local and state organizations. So feel free to come there and get those resources as well. But I'll hang around a little bit afterwards if you have any other questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm almost done. I know we're like at time. I have like 3 more slides, I promise. The next thing I want to share is this is a really awesome local resource we have here in town. It's called Pathway Lending. They're a nonprofit which allows them to do even riskier loans than SBA loans. They require you to be in business a year. You have to have collateral, some cash flow, but then they do very like small loans, or they're able to do small loans. We actually have John in the house from Pathway Lending. John, you want to stand up too? I don't know if you want to say anything.
Hey. Yeah, so I always tell people, if you're thinking about SBA, you should also think about Pathway, because SBA is not a great fit for everybody. As Zach put on the slide, I would say, a lot of what we do is in that 5 to 50 range, but we can go up to 5 million just like SBA. So we can definitely do some larger deals. Usually those involve real estate or big equipment, but I'll stick around too and happy to meet and chat with you guys. And I work here in Nashville and I cover Middle Tennessee, but Pathway Lending covers the entire state.
Thank you so much, John. Yeah, we're so lucky we have these great resources who attended so you can learn more about it. If you can get a loan, I will almost always advise for you to get a loan as opposed to raising equity, but businesses who raise equity are businesses who can't get loans, I guess I would say. So, this is my last slide. Awesome, we're gonna be right on time. How the EC can help you if you're wondering about this. If you're like, I'm ready to raise capital, or I don't know what to do, what makes sense for me. Become a member. It's $15 to join Connect. It's like super cheap for what you get all these events. I have a form you need to fill out. And anyone who signed up for this event, I can email it to you after. Once I receive that form, that kind of just gets in my system so I can keep track of you. Sometimes I'll send you to one-on-one, but oftentimes I'm going to send you to an office hour, so it'll be like a group meeting where we'll still talk about what you need one-on-one, but there will be other people in attendance. And essentially that office hours will allow me to triage you, let's say, to like what I think makes the most sense, and give you almost like a homework of like, here's what we're going to do, and then come back type of thing. And so if we think that we can help you, we will add you to our capital advisors for $100 a month. Our capital advisors advise on very specific things. So we have another advisor membership where you can pick any advisor, and a lot of them advise on so many different stuff. As capital advisors, you can still access all those people, but for capital advisors, I kind of tell you exactly who you need to meet with, and they advise on putting your deck together, so having all those fundraising materials, specifically your pitch, so what you're saying to investors when you meet with them, figuring out your valuation, how much your business is actually worth, figuring out like how you want to raise, what sort of, the safe, what sort of discount and cap like makes sense, the deal evaluation, so just kind of like looking at your deal and being like, all right, like, is this a good deal? Is this a bad deal type of thing? Teaching about how to raise money from like a sales perspective, and then your go-to-market strategy is like, what's your actual plan to like get this business in market, and are investors going to be interested in it? Yeah, and that's our presentation today. Thank you guys for coming. I can certainly answer a lot of questions, but we're done. If you want to. I hate to ask people to stop, but it just feels like a weird ending in silence. Anyways, what questions do people have for me before we sort of break up, so you can also talk to John and our SBA resource here too. Any questions? Let's hear it.
Do you have a running list of partner VCs since you do Capital Connector and where that can be found?
Yes, we don't share it publicly. The reason being is it's our job to manage those relationships. Because think about it this way, like we need VCs to look at the deals that we send, so we can only send them stuff that we know they're going to be interested in. Otherwise, they would stop reading our emails. So I can tell you, like in this role in the past, I've been doing it for 4 months. We've met with 86 venture funds, and growing. So we can definitely advise you on who makes sense to talk to, but we don't share that list publicly. Does that make sense? Yes, we can email the slides to everyone who attended today, certainly. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for coming.